Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Evoke cast. This is Nikki LaRochelle. I'm a coach with Evoke Endurance, and I'm here with Brent Herring from Durango, Colorado, who just completed the fastest known time on the Colorado Trail, westbound, the Collegiate West route, and he did it self-supported. So, Brent, welcome.
Hi, Nikki. Good to be
Hi.
here.
Brent's also my buddy, so I should just clarify that we've been friends. We're old friends and ski partners, so it's very fun to get to interview him. Um, so Brent did this effort in 10 days, 17 hours, and 38 minutes. And Brent, remind me of the mileage.
It was just under 500, so I think it was about 496.
That is so far.
It was the first time I had ever attempted a through hike or ever done a multi-day effort. So it was all new to me as well.
Yeah. Yeah. So, but we'll get into that. Before we do, give us a little bit of your athletic sports background.
So I came from a very traditional team sport background growing up on the East Coast, as many have done. And I came out to Breckenridge and realized that was in 2010. I realized I'd been doing it wrong, and the trails are wonderful, and I liked getting outside. So I met you and all the friendly people in Summit and started trail running, and then discovered I'd been a snowboarder most of my life, and discovered moving in mountains is easier with skis, in my opinion now. So
Yes.
I picked up a little skimo, and I haven't looked back. So I'm just always trying to challenge myself in the mountains.
That's awesome. We have a small but mighty Schemo contingent in the Evoke Endurance audience, so we'll give them
Excellent.
a shout out. There are people. So I wanted to ask you for the audience if you could just briefly explain the difference between in the FKT, that's the fastest known time world. There's three categories. There's self-supported, unsupported, and supported. So I was hoping you could explain the difference between the three.
So I'll do self-supported last because I consider that to be kind of the Goldilocks. Supported is you can have any type of external plan support you want. So you can have an entire crew following you on the trail, carrying things for you, meeting you at any place the road crosses the trail. You could sleep in a van for the night that you already had planned. Um, People cook for you. Maybe they rub your feet if you're feeling a little sore, and they just take care of you the whole way along the route. And it's great. You can go really fast that way, but it's just not for me. And unsupported is really bare bones. You start with all your food, all your supplies, and if anything goes wrong, you can only use what you have in your pack to help you out. The only thing you can collect is water. Even if you know what mushrooms are good, you cannot pick mushrooms. You can only drink water.
Oh, I didn't actually know that. Okay,
Yes.
that's a good detail.
So no foraging.
Okay.
And then self-supported, what I did, you can set your own caches. Um, you carry your own food. You carry all your own supplies. However, if you run into trouble, it's okay to beg, borrow, or steal from strangers along the trail, as long as it's unplanned. So if something went wrong, I couldn't call you and say, Nikki, I really need help. Please bring me some food. But if I saw a random person on the trail and said, hi, I'm Brent, I'm really struggling, can you help me out? I can rely on them.
Okay. Did you actually, I assume you researched the sort of the nuances of these rules before you started?
Yeah, I did a very deep dive on those.
Okay. Okay. That's good to know. And we'll get to your caches momentarily here, how you stash those. But before we get to that, tell us what inspired you doing this effort.
So I've always enjoyed the longer several hour efforts. Um, and I think, as you know, I attempted the 14ers as self-supported a few years back, and I folded whenever the monsoon came in about 8 days in because I'm scared of electrical storms up high. And I had to sacrifice about 2 days, fall behind, and instead of just like soldiering on, I decided to withdraw at that point. So I really wanted to finish the 14ers anyway. Still had all the elks left. So a friend connected me with another friend who was doing one of those long efforts. He was doing the Colorado 14ers, the Wyoming 13ers, and the Montana 12ers. And he spent 3 days with me doing the Elks next to Aspen. And I was talking to him about the effort. And because he did the multi-day stuff, he met up with some friends who also had done like the PCT, and one of them had done the CT. And I picked their brains and was like, this sounds completely insane. I kind of want to try it. And that is what really inspired it. And that took a full year to kind of research it and see if I thought I could pull it off or not.
Yeah. I mean, when you did the 14ers, it seemed like as an observer of that, you demonstrated really good endurance, like your pace, you were keeping a good pace. I remember, correct me if I'm wrong, you were prioritizing sleeping in a way I've seen
Yep.
people attempting that not do, and that seemed to serve you well.
Yeah, that's accurate. I thrive on sleep and just having recovery from really good rest. Whereas I know some people can power through with minimal sleep and just rely on their existing endurance. But for me, I think I get some quick adaptations just in that brief recovery that other people don't rely on as much.
Hmm. Yeah,
I
I it sounds like it from, and we'll talk about your sleep too when we get to you talking about this actual effort, but that's really interesting because that does seem, I can't say I'm terribly familiar with longer FKT attempts or through hikes, but what I've gleaned from what I do know, people seem to really go for minimal sleep. So I'll be curious. We
yes,
should talk about that when we get into it, but I'm with you on sleep. Sleep's so great.
I think it helps you be a little more consistent in something like this, or did for me anyway, versus fading away over time if you
Yeah,
don't get that recovery.
I believe it. Okay, so you felt inspired, but this was a bit of it was an unknown for you. Like this isn't necessarily your wheelhouse. I mean, certainly you have incredible fitness, but you probably felt like you didn't know exactly how it was going to go.
I actually, yeah, I had no idea at all. Hiking, I discovered when I was trying to train for this, not to jump around on you too much. But I come from a running background, and I was doing triathlons for a little while there. So trying to go from running to deliberately going slow and hiking and keeping my heart rate low and trying to do that for hours at a time, it was just really hard for someone who likes to go fast.
Yeah, yeah, let's get into that. That was my next question for you. So you set this objective. It sounds like you were very judicious in how you approached it. You took a year of planning. So tell us about how you approach training. Sounds like some low heart rate, a lot of aerobic training, I'm assuming.
Yeah, I did some strange, very steep hiking intervals just to try to get that economy a little bit because I'm not used to hiking. But then I think my longest day was only 30 miles, and I just started at 6 p.m., went out and deliberately slept for 4 hours, starting around 3 a.m., woke up at 7, and then hiked like another 10 miles after hiking 20 the night before, just to see how that felt. And it felt really good. And then a friend was like, yeah, you did that one night. How's it going to feel when you do that 10 nights in a row? It's like, well, we'll find out. So I did some hiking. I think my biggest week was probably 40 or 50 miles hiking. And besides that, I still did a lot of running and biking because that just feels more comfortable to me. And I knew for something like this, having that cardio base was really important because I wouldn't be burning in that zone 3. In a 5 zone model, I wouldn't be burning above zone 3 pretty much ever. It would just be steadily cruising.
Right. So, and I know you're a student of training methodology. So, how did you or what were you looking to as resources for figuring this out? Like, were you looking into other people who are long through hikers or longer effort types of people, or just went by your gut?
It was a little bit of both. I had talked to those friends the year before about what they did, and they all had very different approaches. The one guy, he was doing regularly 50 miles a day, and he would stack that for training. And he had no children, and he wasn't married. And I was like, well, that's not practical for me. And then I had another friend who was like, if you maintain some intensity, like you'll keep your strength up. And he said, do more strength work than you normally would. So I started going to the gym 2 or 3 times a week. Normally I do one or two, and just doing a lot of squats and deadlifts and making sure my legs were strong because I thought that might help compensate for my lack of really big volume that just wasn't possible for me.
Yeah. Oh, that's interesting. That makes sense. So you kept some intensity. I was curious about that.
Mm.
Yeah, more strength, sure. But you have a full-time job. You're married,
Yes.
got two little girls. So
So
yeah,
I might have cut corners in a few places, and I probably could have gone a little faster. But you hate looking back and saying, "Oh, I could have dropped 24 hours there." Like, that's not realistic.
right. I mean, I hate to disclose my biases, but I do root for the working person. The working parent there's a lot of us and it is hard to make time. So I think it's really impressive you pulled this off.
Oh,
Um,
thank you.
oh yeah. So in terms of your gear, how did you identify what you wanted to bring? And then like ultimately what were sort of the essential pieces you had?
So I talked to a couple people who had done it and looked at a lot of people published their gear list down to the ounce online or even the gram. And I always thought I was a gram counter for skimo until I looked at other people's lists. I was like, how did this person get their dry pack weight below 7 pounds? It doesn't make sense to me.
Wow.
And I also talked to the guy who, his name's Kyle from Durango, who just got the supported record on this route. He did it in under 7 days. And he was like, you really need to bring nothing with you. Like, don't bring a sleeping pad, don't bring a tent, don't bring, I think he said, don't bring a stove. And I talked to him and I was like, but Kyle, I was like, you had people cooking food for you and you were sleeping in a van every night. He's
Yes.
like, yeah, but if you want to go fast, you can't be carrying much. It's like, okay, he's got a point. Uh, but I kind of dismissed his advice a little bit, and I started out with a tarp tent, a stove, and a really light first aid kit. I did all the nerdy things like cutting off the handle of the toothbrush and saving weight wherever I could. But I had those luxury items of the tent and the stove, and it turned out as it went on, he was correct, and I wasn't really using the tent, so I got rid of that first. I used the stove a few times, but realized it wasted a lot of time. So I also left that in one of my caches. And at any given time, my pack probably weighed between 10 and 18 pounds, never more than that.
Okay. That's pretty, I mean, 18's not, insignificant. Um,
No,
I assume when you were doing your training, did you do some with weight on your back or almost always?
I did. Yeah.
Yeah.
Especially early on to get those adaptations with ligaments and tendons and everything. I was taking like a 35-pound pack. And then as it got closer, I started going a little further and I tapered the weight down closer to what I'd be doing while I was out there.
Okay. Okay. And that does sound minimal. You had an inReach and your watch was also collecting data, right? Did you
I
have a
had
watch that did the whole thing?
I had the watch on the entire time, recording, even
Wow.
sleeping.
For any of the gear people, like which watch was that lasted that long?
No, I feel like Sunto should reach out to me.
They should reach out to you. So you had a Sunto.
Yeah, it did. It did get really low, and I had a battery. That was one thing I had with me. So in each cache, I had a pair of boxer shorts, a pair of socks. A lot of them had batteries in them, and then a ton of food. And I also had, I think, wet wipes, so I could like pretend like I was staying clean during this.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I had a little shovel for digging a cat hole that weighed like 2 ounces. My supplies were really minimal. I would consider it the pack, the food, a sleeping bag, a mat for the ground, and then an actual like ground tarp that I used as a burrito when it rained.
Okay.
That was about it.
Yeah. Super minimal. So tell us I want to hear about how what you ate, what food you ate, and then how you did your caches along the way.
So I had a cache. in the beginning, I had caches every 70 miles roughly. And then once I got through Collegiate West, I had caches between 30 and 50 miles. And that was really nice. I started to run out of food. I think it was my third day. I ran out of food with about 30 miles to go. I only had like 1,500 calories left and had another night out, I knew, and was getting desperate. But I digress. um, so yeah, as far as the caches went, it was usually about 7,500 to 8,000 calories of food was the main thing in there.
And so you buried these, correct? Like in the ground? Like how did you know where to remember where they were? How'd you do that?
They were half buried, and I geocached each one. And I actually put a picture of my cat that said "Rest in peace, Tyrone" above them, because a lot of times I marked them with little cairns, and I wanted to make sure I wouldn't like get confused about where they were. So what I did was made it look like a cat grave, because my logic there was if a human were to find this and think it was a cat grave, they would not dig this up. And it worked out.
That is genius and hilarious.
It worked well.
Tyrone. Is Tyrone a real cat? Like I believe
Tyrone is my cat, and he is
oh,
still alive.
your cat. Okay. That's a nice okay, that's a nice twist to the story. I love this. Okay, so geocache. This sounds very organized and clever.
I knew where every single one was. I thought I would actually like forget locations, but I think I started to fantasize about my next cache when I got within like 10 miles of each one. So I knew exactly where they were and
Oh,
had it all planned out. And as far as food went, you asked what I had. I had those dehydrated meals. I think I had Farm to Summit because they gave me really cheap food. So I don't know if you're familiar with them. They're a little small business here in Durango.
oh,
Uh,
cool.
yeah, so I just rotated their meals. I'm a vegetarian, as you know, so I rotated their meals. But I would only eat one of those a day, maybe two if I was really desperate. And then besides that, I had lots of trail mix. There was high density calories. Um, I had Swedish fish. That was more like a comfort item, just because they make me feel good. Each one of my caches had a Coca-Cola in it because I wasn't going to carry extra fluids with me, but having that there, I would just slug that back. Dry coffee and lots of bars and gels. I have no shame in taking on way too many gels for something like this.
Yeah, makes sense. And nutrition's gotten so sophisticated, it seems like a good way to go.
Yeah. One thing I did every morning was oatmeal too. I would cold soak oatmeal overnight and then put, I think it was coconut powder that was full of fat. I thought fat was really important for something like this,
Sure.
especially because I lost 7 pounds that I could not afford to lose.
Yeah, I would say for the audience, you're very lean as it is, so it's remarkable to hear you lost 7 pounds. I don't know where you lost them.
Yeah.
So well let's put a pin in that because I want to talk a little bit at the end about your kind of recovery like post effort. Um
Yep.
very last question before we get into it was how did you do your water? Like what was your water filtering system?
That was kind of interesting. I started out with two filtration bottles that just have right in the lid where you drink, it has that filter. So you can just dip it in a creek, start drinking immediately.
Mhm.
And initially I did that. But I wanted to mix in like Gatorade type stuff. I think I was using Tailwind, but I used a few different ones. I wanted to mix that in, and it's really hard to squeeze water out of those because there's so much resistance. So near the end of this, I got reckless and just started, if it was above about 11,500 feet and there were no cows or humans around, I was just drinking directly out of streams.
Oh, wow. Okay. And did
Yeah.
you have any GI trouble?
Never did.
Wow.
If it was below 11, I always filtered. But if I was up in the mountains, which in like the San Juans and Collegiate West, a lot of that's well above 11,000 feet.
Right.
So I was willing to take the chance.
Okay. Great. That's awesome. Okay. Well, let's kind of dive into this. So we're gonna go day by day and you're gonna hit on the highlights or just what stood out to you with each day. Um, so day one, you started in Waterton Canyon. That's the terminus of the CT and you went to Lost Creek Wilderness. So this is segments 1 through 4. You started at
Yep.
6:13 a.m. So what stood out to you about that first day?
So the first day was overcast, but completely dry and kind of cool. That first day, it was really hard to stop because it felt so easy, especially, I don't know if you've been to Waterton Canyon. It's extremely flat. It's like a road.
Yeah.
And I think I was doing a little over 4 miles per hour just hiking and just resisting the urge to run. So that first day, I felt so good. I think I overdid it. As I was hiking in the dark, I was like, I should probably just lay down now because I'm supposed to sleep. It's a little after midnight. And I did. And the wind picked up. My tent was flapping. I was just sitting there with my eyes wide open. I probably slept maybe half an hour. And at 3 a.m., I was like, I might as well start hiking again because I think the adrenaline was just still pumping through me. And that was a big mistake in hindsight. Um,
Do you think it was a mistake or of course you had adrenaline, like you had been preparing
yeah.
for a year. I just wonder if, you just, you did you made the most fluid choice given the circumstances. Like, had you laid there another 3 hours, sleepless, I don't know if that would have served you any better. I
Yeah,
guess all.
I don't know. I could have taken something to help me sleep. That probably would have been cheating, I guess. But it was just one of those things. I've been going so hard. And I think in that first 24 hours, I did close to 60 miles. Um, but I also had gained, because you're going from Denver, close below 6,000 feet. And I think I was up at 10,500. So I'd gained a lot of elevation that first day. And just to put 60 miles on my body in 24 hours, I didn't know how I would respond. And that's probably the reason my second day was one of my lowest days, if not the lowest.
Yeah, yeah. So day 2, Lost Creek Wilderness to Summit County, segments
Yep.
4 through 6. So I wanted you to specifically talk about, it sounds like you had your lowest low on this day.
Yes. So at 3 a.m., I still felt really good, even though I had only slept maybe 30 minutes. And I was just taking off. I got to Kenosha. That's where my first cache was, 70 miles in. And I was still on cloud 9 at that point. But it was as if, like, once I got to the cache, what I had been looking forward for so long was gone. And then I was kind of rudderless again because I knew my next one was Tennessee Pass, which was another 70 miles. And I hit Georgia Pass and the sun came out and it got really warm. And I was trying to keep up with hydration and electrolytes, but it just really changed the dynamic once the clouds that had been keeping me really comfortable were gone and I had that like 2 p.m. sun. Oh, it was a complete slog over Georgia Pass. And that's when I contacted my wife and I was having doubts at that point. I was less than 100 miles in, and I was moving much slower than I was that first day. And I was like, oh man, I'm not going to hit my goal of 55 miles a day, which I ended up not doing that anyway. I think I discounted the fact that climbing over things like Georgia Pass, you can't possibly maintain over 3.5 miles per hour going up steep grades like that.
Right.
Yeah, so my mileage slowed down a lot. I contacted my wife, was like, I don't know if I can do this. And I got to the bottom of Georgia Pass, laid down. It was only maybe 4 or 5 p.m. I found an unoccupied campsite and laid down and just expressed my doubts to her. And essentially, she said, yes, you can. You can do it. Get up now.
I love that.
But the crazy thing is, like, at that point in this campsite, I had like taken out my ground sheet, sleeping bag, everything. It was like laying down, ready to like be done for the night, just see if I could continue on. And I got her text and felt like I was disappointing my wife. So I kind of rallied at that point and went over West Ridge in the dark. I put up another like 15 or 20 miles and then just passed out going down into, I think is that Horseshoe Gulch?
It
Yeah.
is. Yeah.
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 That was an interesting night too.
Because you were up fairly high then where you camped. Because it looked like you were
Yes.
up on, we were following the tracker up on West Ridge, right? Somewhere along the way.
Yeah, I got over West Ridge. And in my head at that point, I think it was about 10 p.m. I thought I'd be able to make it all the way down to Route 9. And then I was like, like this is fair to sleep at this point. Like I rallied once, I don't need to keep rallying through the night and really put myself into a hole. So I laid down, those switchbacks that go down towards Route 9 after you're over West Ridge.
Yeah.
Um, I was tired of going down those, so I just found one that had like a small little ledge carved out on the side of one of those switchbacks and laid down
Okay.
at about 11 p.m. And that's when I was woken at 12:30 by a bike racer because the Colorado Trail Race was going on.
Yes, yes.
Yeah,
I failed to mention that earlier. Right. So the Colorado Trail, it's sort of an informal mountain bike race.
yeah,
It's
it's like
sort of the
75
same-
people.
75. Yeah, it's well known in the right circles. So he or she, they woke you up just by accident or
Oh my God, this guy was flying down the trail. He had like floodlights on his bike, so that's what really woke me up. And he was still like 30 or 40 yards away. I'm like, I just sat up like like just with a nightmare look on my face. I was like, please don't hit me. And the guy was like, I see you, brother. And then he just like rolled right down. And I was like, oh man, that was scary.
yes, that sounds a bit jarring. Okay.
And then I just fell asleep again. It rained in the middle of the night. That was the first night of rain. I had no idea what was in for me at that point. But that was the first night where I didn't worry about a tent and I just rolled my little ground sheet over me like a burrito. It's like, oh, this works pretty well. Rain
Yeah.
on my face is okay.
Oh, yes. And how did you sleep other than getting woken up? Did you sleep a bit better this night?
I slept great that night. I think
Okay.
I probably slept about 8 hours realistically.
Okay.
Because I
Yeah.
laid down at like 10:30, woke up at like 6:30, between 6 and 6:30.
Yes. Okay. And now you're back. I mean, you used to live in Summit County. You're basically back on your old stomping grounds, which maybe did that give you like a nice warm feeling in your heart to know you're amongst friends?
Yes, there was a very warm, fuzzy feeling, especially when I hit like Route 9. It was like, oh, I've been here so many times before. I really miss it here. The nostalgia was overpowering.
Yeah.
Uh, so going, like I've heard people say going over Peak 5, I believe it is, to get over the 10-mile range on Miners Creek. I think it's Miners Creek. They say that's like really hard. But for me, that flew by and I loved it. And I missed those views. And then dropping into Copper, I knew that Copper had all those restaurants that were open. So I was like, oh, I'm going to get a hot meal. It's going to be wonderful. Because if I was unsupported, I could not get a hot meal there. But because I was self-supported, I could stop in and get a giant plate of pasta. And
Okay.
that was
So I should just I wanted to share this small anecdote that we were on an adult league soccer team together, of which there's a large text chain. And this happens to be a pretty rambunctious group of people texting about you. And like a good portion of your soccer team was showing up, cheering you on through Summit County. So that was
yes.
cool. Oh, one little detail I want to share is Mel, our friend, was trying to find you, and I told her she said she was hiding under the bridge under Highway 9, but then I saw you run across Highway 9. I honked at you. And so I was worried Mel missed you because you went across the highway.
Oh, she came running out.
Okay, okay. So you had some friends, you got a meal in at Copper Mountain. That's great. Some pasta. Um, any other remarkable happenings on day 3, or was that you made it to Tennessee Pass
Oh,
that night?
yeah. Day 3 was actually really good after that pasta. I also ran into a random friend of ours, Jenny, Jamie's wife, while I was
Yes.
over in Copper. And she's like, oh, what are you doing here? Do you have time to talk? And I was like, no, I got to go
Yes.
after my meal. Um, yeah, I felt really good climbing over to Thurl Pass, I believe it is.
Yeah, Cyril and Kokomo, you ran down
Yeah.
Camp Hale. Is that about where you
Yeah, I
camped?
was about Camp Hale. Yeah, I saw these bike packers and actually spent a lot of time leapfrogging with them. And just, it's crazy having other people on the trail with you, especially if you spend more than an hour with them. It's so uplifting, even when they're strangers. So bouncing back and forth with the bike packers, that was nice. they told me I could charge some electronics because at Copper was the start of all my electronics dying. My phone, my tracker, my watch, everything just being low on battery pretty much the rest of the trip. So I stopped in where they set up camp, and they let me cook a meal there, like, and hang out. And they're like, you can sleep here. It's 9 p.m. It's pretty dark. And I was like, no, I got to put up another 15, 20 miles tonight. They're like,
Oh,
you're insane. So I continued down towards Tennessee Pass, and around like 11 p.m. I was ready for bed. But I don't know if you've been to Camp Hale. It's extremely steep and full of deadfall along that
yeah,
area.
yeah.
And it seemed like every single campsite was at a premium. So I had to walk an extra 2 hours, just cursing more and more loudly as I passed occupied site after occupied campsite. And then finally, I just found a flat spot and collapsed.
Okay. And I want to ask you this. This is a more overarching question, but how familiar did you feel like you were with the route? I mean, 500 miles is a lot of route to learn about. So to what degree did you feel acquainted with what you were doing?
Well, Summit County, of course. I knew that section, and I knew a lot of the sections in here near Durango. But for the most part, it was looking at it on a map and then looking at the elevation profile, but really having no idea what I was in for. I didn't know what sections were smooth. I had no idea what sections were going to be like full of scree. I didn't know what to expect for pretty much the entire middle section between Summit and Durango.
Right. Okay. Because I did want to ask you, maybe before you get into day five. So day five was Mount Massive Wilderness to Lake Ann Pass segments, 10 to Collegiate West 02. So can you
Yep.
explain the Collegiate East, Collegiate West situation to,
Yeah, somewhat. I know Collegiate East was the first one when the Colorado Trail was originally finished. I think that was the 60s, I want to say. Originally, it was Collegiate East, and it's a little flatter. It's on a somewhat drier side. I don't want to call it unremarkable, but compared to the West, it is unremarkable. Whereas the West is more like the high mountain side. That's where you go about 40 miles and you're above 12,000 feet for that entire 40 miles, it feels like. Um, yeah, I think it's also, so it has about 2,000 to 3,000 feet more elevation gain on the west side. And it's also a little bit longer, like 5 to 10 miles longer on that west
okay.
side. It was gorgeous. Like it was so pretty. I had no regrets about going that route.
Oh, great. But in essence, the trail splits and goes like you
Yes.
go around the Collegiate Mountain Range on either the west or east side.
Yeah, and that's right at Twin Lakes where it splits.
Okay, at Twin Lakes.
And
Okay.
then if you go the east route, you go through the hot springs there. Is that BV or Princeton Hot Springs? So a lot of people will stop there and spend a night, sit in the hot springs and recover a little bit. You're really isolated on the west side. There are no towns until Monarch, and you're up high with just no services whatsoever.
Right, right, of course. Which Monarch's a far, that's you're pretty far in at that point.
Yeah, I think Monarch's just past the halfway point.
Okay, yeah. So day five, what else? I think you had did you say you had a hard day on day five?
I think it was, is that the day my day four was the hard day. That's when, Nikki, I have never had foot pain in my entire life, skiing, running, anything, but I've also never stacked 50-mile day after 50-mile day. So that day going between Tennessee Pass over to the end of Mount Massive Wilderness.
Oh yeah, sorry, I skipped ahead. Yes, I'm
That's
sorry.
okay.
Tennessee Pass yes, keep going. Your foot, not good.
Yeah, Holy Cross Wilderness has an old school trail where you feel like you're mountaineering and trying to climb up Quandary Peak or something. So you're just going over lots of loose rocks and scree. You're not using your hands. It's class two, but like it's just miserable class two.
Oh,
Yeah. So my feet bonked on me, and suddenly the tendons were screaming, the ligaments were screaming, the muscles were screaming, and it was all on the very bottom of my foot. So I finally made it over to Mount Massive Wilderness that afternoon, and I couldn't go more than 5 or 10 miles without soaking my feet in a creek for like 20 minutes just to give a little reprieve from that pain.
oh wow. Were you fearful that it was the end of your effort? Like you did something really bad?
I was worried I was gonna have to take a full rest day or something. just
Yeah.
because like it hurt that much to walk. And I had hiked just a little bit in the rain before that, so I also had a pinky toe issue where the skin was just falling off of my pinky toe from a blister, and I was really worried that I was going to have an infection on it. So I was kind of keeping an eye on that too. Uh, I just did not anticipate how much pain my feet would be in. Um,
Was it because I assume you were hiking on a consistently off camber, like down to your right, correct? Like, was
uh,
it
uh, well,
cambered? Not necessarily.
no, not really. I think it was, but whenever that I got in that Holy Cross Wilderness area, all the wilderness areas did not have trails as good as the non-wilderness areas. So if you bike it, you can't go through wilderness, and I think it's easier on a bike, but don't tell them I said that. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, I think it was just being in the wilderness areas of Massive and Holy Cross stacked together. It's a lot of mileage to
Yes.
keep my feet up, and stacking all that mileage just wore on me. So actually that night, um, I wanted to make it to Twin Lakes and I did not. I actually laid down at the very end of Mount Massive Wilderness just as the sun was going down. It was probably about 8 p.m. It was like, I'm done. My feet are just toast. I don't know how I'm going to feel tomorrow. Hopefully I can rally.
Right. Right. So now it's day 5. So that is not massive to Lake Ann. So what stood out to you then? You're now around your halfway point.
Yeah, so I think I woke at 3 a.m. that day and I felt really good. It started to rain. But despite the rain, I was like, okay, it's 3 a.m. I've been sleeping for a long time. I'm gonna start moving. And it was as if I was like starting over. My feet felt great. So I think just that 6 or 7 hours of rest really made a big difference with that recovery. Started moving in the dark. I started passing a lot of Mount Albert climbers at like 4 and 5 a.m. who were confused. They're like, "Oh, you're already done." Like, no, I got a few hundred miles left to go. How about you?
Yes.
And then at dawn, I was going past Twin Lakes, and I was like, "Man, it'd be really nice to stop in at Twin Lakes and get a hot meal and like resupply a little bit." Instead, the route goes around Twin Lakes, and you don't go into the town itself.
Ah,
Pretty hard. So I went around this flat lake a long way, stopped and recharged batteries with the Colorado 14ers initiative. They helped out immensely. So I made oatmeal there at like 6:30 a.m. Just chatted with this guy. Nikki, at any point I could chat with someone and not worry about like having a good pace going. I took every opportunity to do that. It was really nice to talk to
I
people.
I think that's an important detail to share because you're also, I mean, you're managing your body and you're trying to do this huge effort, but your headspace is really important. So I imagine that that felt like a real boost to be able to talk.
Yeah. And I'm an extrovert, so like I need interaction with people. Yeah. So I took advantage of those opportunities.
Yeah.
Uh, yeah, so I continued around Twin Lakes, and it was when I started going up on the Leadville Trail route, Hope Pass. I was eating more because I was working a little bit harder going up the steep sections. And that's when I realized I had hardly any food left because I was like, oh, maybe I'll make a dehydrated meal. Oh, I don't have any of those. Oh my God, all I have is some trail mix. What am I going to do?
Oh,
And that's when I started asking random people if they had food. One guy was like, "Oh, I can spare a gel, no problem." I was like, "Oh, this isn't going to do it though." Another woman gave me 2 gels. She was very kind. And then I just hit the mother load with some women who were doing like a section hike from They were doing the section hike from Cottonwood Pass out to Twin Lakes. And it was the very end of their trip going down Hope Pass. And they're like, "Oh, well, we have 2 giant bags full of trail mix, and we have all these protein bars. It weighs a lot, and we're tired of carrying it. Would you like these?" I was like, "Yeah, I'll take like 10 pounds of food from you." Sure.
that's great. And of course,
Yeah.
I just imagine this being an older gaggle of women, was it?
No, it was actually two young ladies going to a wedding.
Oh, oh,
Yeah,
sweet. Okay. I don't know why I imagined a bunch of.
that was a good guess. The woman who gave me 2 gels was older, and I was like, "I don't think you should give these to me because you're older and you need these more than I do." But she still gave it to me.
Oh,
So,
okay.
so that day was great. It was pretty good. I mean, at this point, a lot of the days bled together. But I made it over towards collegiate collegiate peak wilderness. And in this section, it gets so pretty. If you spend any time in the Sawatch, a lot of it looks a little bit generic. You just have the giant peaks going out of the valleys. But if you've been over by Ice Lake and the Apostles, like it looks more like the San Juans or something like that. So you climb over Lake Ann Pass. My toes started to bother me more then, so I had no problems with my feet whatsoever at this point. But that same toe that had the blister that popped was getting real bad. It was making me hobble. So I just struck up a conversation with two nurses who were really good at first aid and like took care of me right on the side of the trail there.
Oh,
That was
wow.
wonderful.
Did they tape your feet or what'd they do?
Yeah, they inserted some stuff, some like gauze between my feet. They taped it up and they looked at it. They're like, it looks like it's really inflamed, but it's not infected. You're probably good. You should sit down and let it air out. And I was like, that's not possible. They're like, well, at night you need to let it air out, however long you do sleep. It's like, okay, understood. And they gave me some first aid supplies that really helped out with treating my toe the rest of the time. So it became manageable, even though it was really painful.
That's great. I mean, I love these little anecdotes along the way that you found some help. You ran into a bunch of nice women.
Oh,
Uh,
yeah, it's always the women that were so helpful.
yeah, of
The
course,
men just roll their eye like, what's wrong with you, bro?
no sympathy. So that brings us to day 6, Lake
Yep.
Ann Pass to Boss Lake. I do want to ask you before we get to that, what did you have any inklings of wanting to do Nolans when you were in this zone? Were you thinking about it or?
I've thought about Nolan's before. Have you?
Yeah, I mean, you and I had talked about it a long time ago. I felt sad to hear that some social trails were developing from that.
Yes.
If that's rationale, I don't know if that's a significant enough reason to not do it. I mean, really, I think it would be fantastic. It does seem like a lot of effort and time out on course if you really wanted to do well. So, but I suspect you would do quite well at that.
I've always been interested in it. And I think once I finished doing the 14ers, I think I just put that on the back burner for a bit. Maybe I'll revisit it in the future. We're getting old though. I mean, I probably only have like 5 to 10 more years of being somewhat fast.
Yes, but did you follow UTMB and Ludwig Palmeret, who got 5th and he's 48 and he just won Hard Rock?
Oh, I couldn't believe when he won Hard Rock.
I know
Yeah, he gives us all hope.
he does. He did UTMB 20 years ago as his first effort, and went faster at 48 this year.
That's insane to me.
Yes, so we can't give up any hope whatsoever because of Ludwig. So, anywho, okay, so day 6.
Yeah,
You
so day 6 was really good. I finally got into like the true Collegiate West. It was gorgeous. Like there's a brand new trail that is above. I think it's called Texas Creek. This whole area was completely unfamiliar to me. I'd only been to the Apostles once, and that was for search and rescue. So this was more enjoyable. So I was winding through on the backside of those, and you look down at, I think it's Cottonwood Lake or something like that. On the other side of Cottonwood Pass, it goes to a lake. As you're approaching Cottonwood Pass, it's a really pretty area. I recommend it to anyone who hasn't been there. And at this point, I was getting really close to my next cache, Cottonwood. And mentally, every time I got within 5 to 10 miles of another cache, it would just lift my spirits to the moon. So I knew I was getting close and felt really good that morning going up there.
So I assume sort of like an aid station in a race where you start knowing,
Yes.
yeah, you just start thinking about it. It becomes this milestone that you're aiming to get to. So that makes sense.
Yeah, and Cottonwood, as you know, Cottonwood's very busy because it's one of the higher passes that's paved. There were people everywhere, and I had the cache pretty close to that parking lot there. And when I pulled it out, like so many people are looking at me like, "What is this weirdo doing?" And some guy comes up, he's like, "Where'd you get them goodies?" I was like, "I put them here." He's like, "What do you mean you put them here?" I'm like, "I'm through hiking. It's a cache of food." And he's like, "You're hiking?" And I was like, "Yeah." And he's like, "Okay," and just climbed back in his SUV and took off. It was a
This
great exchange.
Sometimes when I'm on airplanes with my small children that are misbehaving, my mantra is like, I'll never see these people again. So
Yep,
it's maybe
I thought
mantra,
exactly that.
a little obscure out there on the trail. You just can tell yourself you'll likely never see them again. So,
Yeah. And so Cottonwood is where the highest segment of the entire thing is. Of the 28 segments, it's the highest one.
okay. And how high are you hitting?
You're you're between like 12.5 and 13K for a lot of that one.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's high.
And I ran into another person there. I think he was, oh man, I met so many people, Nikki. He was either Colombian or Ecuadorian. Uh, and he was also through hiking. And he's like, "Can I hike with you? I move pretty fast." I'm like, "Yeah, absolutely." We were together for like maybe 5 to 10 miles. But then I was like, "Oh, this is the kind of terrain I like to run downhill." And he's like, "You're running? You have a pack on?" I was like, "Yeah, I've got to. I just run. Do you want to run with me?" And he's like, "I'll try." And yeah, he didn't like the running. So
Okay.
I lost my buddy of like 5 to 10 miles.
Oh, well, that's nice. And it sounds like you say here you met a family group, a father, mother, son.
Oh
Uh,
yeah. So after you go through the very pretty one down to Tin Cup Road, I think it was called, I started climbing again, and this was late afternoon. And you go on to this old railroad tunnel, and along there, these people were taking up all the space on the CT with like their tents and their dogs and everything. And it looked to me as I was coming up on them like they were trying to move for me. So I was like, "Oh, you don't need to move." And they're like, "Oh, we weren't planning to." Like, oh, these people are nice. I like them. So I sat down with them and used like their battery bank to start charging. And yeah, that's where I was given the nickname Charger by these people because
was
they're
that
like,
did that become your trail name?
that was, I guess, my trail name.
Okay.
Yes.
It's worth explaining, like in through hiking, the trail name thing.
It's an interesting phenomenon to me as well. People who spend a lot of time through hiking, and there's plenty of people who are part of this subculture, they all introduce themselves with trail names. So early on, people, I'd say like, "Oh, I'm Brent," and they just say their trail name. And that was the whole conversation. I'm like, "I don't have one of those yet. I just started." And they're like, "Okay, well, maybe you'll get one."
Right, because I think the sort of informal rule, or maybe it's very formal, I don't really know, but someone has to give you your trail name. Is that correct?
It seems like it to me. I,
Yeah.
I, I feel like it's a little haughty to give yourself a trail name.
So
But
Charter, I think that's a great name.
yeah, it's different. This woman Goose is the one who gave it to me. So they all introduce themselves as their trail names, and I'm like, "I'm Brent. I didn't get one yet." They're like, "Oh, well, you need a trail name." She's like, "You're using our charger, and you're hard charging through the mountains. I think you're Charger." I was like, "All right, sounds great."
Perfect. Charger, which
Double
that,
entendre.
yeah, yeah, exactly. That leads us to day 7. So Boss Lake to Sergeant's Mesa, segments. You're still on the Collegiate West,
Yep.
5:15.
So this was a really strong day because I was able to sleep with no rain in Aspen Grove, and it was flat. It wasn't like literally on the trail, and that was at Boss Lake. Um, so I woke up that morning knowing I was close to Monarch Pass, and that was like civilization for the first time since Copper. So like I got up onto it. Actually goes through the Monarch Ski Resort, which is kind of cool, like all the way on the top. Yeah, and you
Yeah,
can
did you
see it
know
from the distance.
the High Lonesome 100 course is follows this?
Oh, I had no idea.
Yeah, so you did that Tin Cup Pass and then um Boss Lake and then up and all along that high. And that's typically racers, that's during the night, which
Okay.
was hard. And then hitting Monarch, and then that's where you descend down to that big parking area is one of their big
Yes.
stations. So,
So I took a quick break at Panoramic Lift in Monarch. There was an unlocked door to the top of one of the lifts. So I just hopped in there for like 30 minutes to be a nerd and like charge my electronics. And I actually left the charger that you plug everything into up there. So I was
oh,
thinking, my daughter does ski comps, Mira. I was thinking whenever she has her ski comp at Monarch, maybe I'll stop at the top of Panoramic and ask if I can have my little charger back
there you
to plug
go.
everything into. But yeah, so I stopped there briefly, and then just coasted like really fast down to Monarch Pass. It was nice how fast I was moving at that point.
Yeah,
Uh,
let's check
yeah.
in with how your body's doing. Like I mean, it sounds like you had some trouble with your feet, but what's the muscular fatigue like for you at this point?
Honestly, it never got too bad. It was always in the background. So I could feel it, but at that point, actually for most of it was just a sensation, like in my legs. I could tell they were sore. And on days when I didn't sleep well, like we talked about earlier, the better I slept, the better my legs felt every morning. And this day I had slept, I think about 6 hours. Um, yeah, I woke up and felt really good. Once I got to Monarch Pass, like I was on cloud nine. I had two burritos, just sat there. I think I had a coffee, and it's really nice just touching in with civilization during something like this and talking to random people.
I mean, you saying that makes me think of how sweet those moments are, like how good food tastes, how good a
Yes.
cup of coffee is. Like it almost creates this new perspective for these things we take for granted all the time, like eating and got a cup of coffee.
I
Um,
agree with you 100%. I was just telling someone the other day this. Like, I was like, I appreciate so many small things more by doing something like this.
Yeah, especially when your body is so, it's hyper reliant on food at this point. Like,
Yes.
so if food just takes on this whole new meaning and this whole new significance, when the iron or the fire's burning a lot.
Yeah.
So I,
I got smacked in the face whenever I left Monarch Pass, though. Have you ever been to Monarch Crest, the big biking trail?
I have once, yes,
Okay.
a lot of,
I was there on a Saturday. So everybody was out. And I was enjoying the random people, but not so much there because I kept passing like really slow people who were pushing their bikes uphill. And then they would pass me going downhill and they'd be like, on your left, on your right. I'm like, oh man, I have to keep stepping off trail for these people. But that's what happens when you go through Monarch Crest on a Saturday.
yes, yes. So wait, now I think you had said, tell us about getting to Sergeant's Mesa.
Let's see. What, where did I sleep that night? Um, sorry, Nikki. You might have
It
to
looks
edit this.
like, oh, I'm reading it. It looks like you laid down shortly after midnight by some propped up deadfall.
Oh my God, this was terrifying. Yeah. I moved really well this day, and like I had an audio book in. For the most part, I was hiking without any music and without audiobooks or anything, but I did start to experience boredom after I got past Monarch Pass. It was just kind of it was the doldrums a little bit, and it's also where the Collegiate West route meets up with the Collegiate East route. So they came back together, and I knew I had to make it to Monarch Pass, no, not Monarch Pass, Marshall Pass, where my next cast was. And I got there, and after that, like I was just on autopilot at this point. I felt pretty good, and all of a sudden, I went for my headlamp, and the battery like flashed, which was weird because I charged it. It turned out the battery like just died on me, so it couldn't be charged anymore.
Oh,
Yeah, so I had some backup batteries, but this was in a place that Sergeant's Mesa might be haunted. I'm not sure. It's extremely flat. It's very dark. There's deadfall everywhere. And there's also those widowmaker trees that have probably been standing like that for 3 years, just waiting for the correct windstorm to take you out.
um,
And because my headlamp was starting to die, I had to have it on like the ultra low mode where you feel like you're in a haunted house or something. And I started to get tired. So I was like, I don't think these trees are going to end. But it started to drizzle. And I was like, I'm just going to go to sleep. There's drizzle. There's no wind. This is great. It's like 11 p.m. So I laid down. And all of a sudden, I was woken at like 2 a.m. by the sound of the wind. And I look around in this full moon night, and there's just like all these widowmakers in every direction, like facing me. And
oh
I was
no.
like, the chances of them coming down in the wind are really minimal. So I like closed my eyes again, and I could not sleep. It was in the back of my head, and I was scared for my life.
Sure. So
Yeah.
did you get an early start? So now it would be day 8. Did you?
Yeah. This was the middle of the night, probably around 1:30 or 2. I just packed everything up and started moving.
Oh,
I met a random biker at that point. He was going the other direction from the racers, but he was just out bike packing, and talked to him for a little bit. He was like, yeah, these trees are scary and the wind really picked up. What are you going to do? I was like, well, I'm just going to keep moving, I guess. He's like, yeah, I don't know what to do. It's like, all right, well, see you later. Good luck. So I
Right.
kept walking, and I think it was probably about 4 or 5 a.m. I got to a place where the deadfall was shorter, still deadfall, but it wasn't like Widowmakers. So I collapsed on the ground about 4 a.m. It started to rain some more. Got up at like 5:30. So this was a really rough night for recovery.
Okay. Because this next day, Sergeants Mesa to Eddiesville. This is segments 16 through 19. Was there, it sounds like, did you encounter even more deadfall or did it dissipate a bit?
It dissipated greatly. Once you get off Sergeant's Mesa, it's not as doom and gloom anymore. So you kind of descend down, and then all of a sudden you're on gravel roads for, I'd say, about 20 to 25 miles. And that's kind of like the connector into La Garita Wilderness. So you're getting out of the Swatch area, and it's basically just linking up those two mountain ranges. So as a result of that, it's probably the most boring segment
Oh,
of the entire thing, because you're just walking on roads until you hit La Garita Wilderness. And have you visited there?
no.
It's so pastoral. There aren't very many people, and you just drop into these oxbow valleys with moose and wildlife and beaver dams. And I'm
Oh,
like, what is this wonderful place?
that's good to
So,
know. I'm going to note that La Garita. That's a little,
yeah.
if anyone's still listening with us, that it will be a good, uh, that's like a little gem they can take away.
Yeah, I got my spirits lifted enormously at this point. And I think I took like 3 or 4 videos where I'm like, this is the most wonderful place in all of Colorado I've ever seen in my life.
Oh,
Uh,
well, we'll link your FKT, your post. So in the show notes so
okay.
that people can visit and see your videos and pictures.
Okay.
Yes.
So I made it through there, and I felt really good. Climbed out of there and went to Eddiesville Trailhead, which is Eddiesville's, like, if you're on that side of San Luis, one of the most isolated 14ers, that's the trailhead you use to go up San Luis.
Right. They call it the loneliest 14er.
Yeah, there were some people there when I arrived, and I said, "Oh, hey everyone, I'm cowboy camping, and I'll be getting up at 3 a.m. I hope none of you mind." And this guy looked at me like, "What are you talking about? Are you going for one of those FKTs?" I'm like, "Yeah, I am actually." He's like, "Oh, okay, cool." He's like, "Why don't you go sleep in the privy?" I'm like, "Oh, I wasn't gonna do that, but it would be nice not to worry about rain for one night." So yeah, I slept in a pit toilet that night.
Great. I mean, when you're there's no shame. You just do what you need to do.
Oh, nice. Yeah, no regrets at all. I had a really good night of sleep. I think I woke
Okay.
up around 3:30 that night, started hiking up to San Luis. That was a beautiful morning. Got sunrise like right up on that San Luis saddle there. It was pretty. I felt good this day too, for the most part, until I bonked. This is where I think the fatigue was starting to really accumulate. And I was getting, even if I had a good night rest, it wouldn't matter. I would hit this really hard bonk mid-afternoon, no matter what, at this point.
Yes. And it sounds like, is this where you ran into Jeff Browning?
Yep, same day. Yeah.
So for the audience, can you explain what Jeff Browning was up to and who he is?
So Jeff Browning is an acclaimed 50-something ultra runner. He has amassed lots of really big wins. And he decided, how old is he now? I want to say he's like 58, but I might be wrong about that.
I don't think he's quite that old, but yeah, he's like a
It's like
very
mid 50s.
established ultra runner.
We'll say he's mid 50s. I'm pretty sure he is somewhere
Okay.
in his mid 50s. And yeah, it was in the evening. There was no one else around. It was starting to get cool because it had rained really hard right as I was crossing the main road there where one of my caches was. I took shelter under a tree, and then I was like, I got to keep moving. It's late afternoon. All of a sudden, like, the fog clears from this rain, and here comes a guy just wearing really short shorts and a tank top. And in the back of my head, I was like, oh, that's got to be Jeff Browning. No one else is going to be out here looking like this guy. Sure enough, it was Jeff. He was running way ahead of his pacer, who was carrying like all his stuff for him.
Oh,
So like he stopped and talked to me for a second. He's like, "Oh, I heard about you. Good luck."
oh, that's cool.
Yeah,
Yeah. And he did get the record, correct?
he did for that direction. Same as me. Like I got the record in that direction I was going. He got it in the direction he was
Got the
going.
eastbound supported, whatever collegiate version.
I think he did. I think he did the west side of the collegiates. Yep.
Okay.
Going
o-
eastbound to Denver.
Okay. Well, that makes sense. You would start feeling fatigued because now we're moving into day 10. So are you feeling like you're like close to your zone of home, like the Durango?
Yeah, I knew I had to go into the Weminuche Wilderness, and Weminuche Wilderness is pretty technical, lots of big mountains, lots of up and down. So I wanted to get through that to Molas Pass because Spring Creek Pass is what I'd gone through there, and it was 50 miles to my next cache, which was Molas Pass. So I knew Molas Pass would be like my home stretch. Just had to get through the Weminuche, and that's actually probably the prettiest section of the entire trail. Is that section from? I'm blanking on the name of it here. But when you
Um,
get to Molas Pass, Stony Pass.
Stony Pass, yeah. So this was day 10, CT High Point to Cascade Creek, segments 22 to 25.
Yes. And I don't know if you have any nerds out there that know geology, but like you have the basement rocks, like ancestral Rockies going into the Weminuche. And then all of a sudden, the only place in Colorado you can see quartzite is also in the Weminuche. And that's like Vestal Basin. And you go between those two on the way there, and you're like over top looking down into them. It is so pretty. You got to go if you haven't.
Oh yeah, I mean the Winnemucca is a really distinct looking area that you can see when you ride the Silverton Durango train. But the mountains just have a certain character and shape that are unlike anything else in the state or probably even the country.
It's absolutely gorgeous.
Yeah. So
There's
for
an there's an
that,
area called the Hunchback Pass. I went. Sorry, not to interrupt you, Nikki.
oh,
Hunchback Pass. I went over, and everyone says it's always pouring down rain there. And it was actually like a little bit sunny, just a few clouds. And I got really cocky. I was like, "Oh, I'm in the clear. It's not going to rain here. I'm fine." So I dropped into Elk Creek Basin and was going out of Elk Creek there in that canyon. And then the skies just started opening up over and over and over again, starting at like 5 p.m. until like 8:30 p.m.
oh. And are you getting cold? Like, what did that tell us about? We haven't hit on that at all. Like, were you getting cold at night or?
I was cold a few times at night. There was one night when I slept at the high point, just below 13,000 feet, and like it was a clear night, so it got really cold. But for the most part, I was fine because a lot of times it was raining and overcast at night, so it was actually warmer than it would have been with clear nights. That
Okay,
helps. Yeah.
okay. So, but you got rained on, and then it sounds like, but you know in your report that you're now at the last 72 miles. Um,
Yeah, I made it to Molis. That was uneventful. It was just like hard to get there. It was about 8 p.m. But um, before I had set that cache, my kids snuck some letters into the very last cache. That's like, you can do it, Dad, that kind of stuff. And I saw those and was like, I need to pull an all-nighter and like get there as soon as I can.
oh, that's so sweet because this is what okay, so day 11, Cascade Creek to Junction Creek Trailhead. So segments 25 to 28. I have to
Yeah.
ask you about this because you write about feeling really emotional towards the end. I mean, we can talk about, this day in full, but I don't think of you as like a highly emotional person. So I'd like you to talk about what that meant for you. Or you're not someone that just is as openly emotional. Is that fair to say? Can I say that?
Yeah, that's fair. I'm not guarded with my emotions, but I'm just not a very emotional person. On my
Okay.
on my way out, like so Nikki, it rained really hard in the last 10 miles, of course, because it had rained for much of this. And then like the rain cleared with about 3 miles to go. I filled up my water one more time at Junction Creek. And as I was walking those last 3 miles, like we didn't talk about, but I'd experienced on this very last day, like some pretty good hallucinations.
Mm,
Like auditory, like I felt like I could hear people talking and partying, and there was no one else around. And there's a name for it, but when you look at a tree or some inanimate object that's random and you see like a face in it, that was happening a lot to me, and it never happened before. So I think the exhaustion had caught up to me, and it's having this. When you get really exhausted, you get more emotional. I think, at least I do.
sure.
So in those last 3 miles, as I realized I was done, like I had a good cry. It was nice. And it wasn't like tears of joy or tears of like, I'm in so much pain. It was just like a profound, like, yay, it's over. I'm really happy that I've hit this point and I'm not doing this anymore. And I appreciate everything in life more than I did before.
Wow. Yeah, that's really cool. So your time, I'll say it again, 10 hours, or I'm sorry, 10 days, 17 hours, 38 minutes. Do you recall what time you had actually ended up beating? Like who had held the previous time?
So actually, this particular route had not been set before.
Oh,
I,
really?
I was told, because I messaged them, they told me it was about 12 hours. I was like, well, it's not on the website. They're like, if you beat 12 hours, you have it. I think, okay, whatever. Sounds great.
Paul told you that.
Yes.
Okay. Okay.
Because there was one I did before where they're like, Anton Krupicka actually did this back in 2013. You didn't beat his time. And I was like, well, it's not on your website. How am I going to know that?
Yeah, good point. Okay.
Yeah. So I had wanted to beat the guy who did the same route I did, but in the opposite direction. And I came up 5 hours short of him.
Oh, man.
Yeah.
But you're,
However, he had done it before, supported, and then he did it again, self-supported. And he said he knew every single segment inside and out. I was like, well, I just wanted to through hike the Colorado Trail fast. So
yeah.
you got me.
But you also say you would never do it again. Is that still the case?
Uh, at this, yeah, that's still the case.
Okay.
I think overnight through hikes for speed, I don't know if those are for me necessarily at this point in my life.
Okay. Well, tell us briefly about your recovery. Like, how have you felt since you did this? And it was about what, a week and a half ago or so, 2 weeks ago?
Yeah. Yeah, it's been about 2 weeks now. My heart rate's still elevated in the morning whenever I measure it, about 5 to 10 beats per minute resting heart rate, which I'd never experienced before.
Yeah.
I've talked to a few people who say that's completely normal for an effort like this because you just accumulate fatigue and your body's used to that flight or fight kind of response day after day.
Yeah.
Um, my feet are starting to dry out. I had a little bit of trench foot, and now the skin's, I won't show you any pictures. I'll spare you that. The skin's coming off in very large chunks now.
Oh,
They're cracking and drying, and it's a little bit painful. The one thing that recovered quickly was my legs. I feel really good. Like I can run. I went for a run today. Felt great.
okay. Great.
Yeah. Just
Okay.
keeping everything in like zone one, zone two. And I've never had a recovery that takes more than a week. It's kind of weird for me.
Yes. Wow. Yeah. I mean, a week sounds totally within reason, even if it took more than that. A few weeks seems reasonable for an effort like that.
Yeah.
Did,
Like the overtraining syndrome thing, that phenomenon, I always was like, I can't really relate to that. And having done this, I'm like, I can see how people get themselves into like a really big hole.
yeah.
Yeah.
Right. Like you can tell you need to give your body time and space
Yeah.
to.
That whole like cardiovascular parasympathetic thing, I can feel that now.
Yeah. Yeah, sure. Um, with your weight, you said you had lost 7 pounds. Have you regained that weight?
I I've put on all but about 1 or 2 of those pounds.
Okay.
So I'm feeling pretty good in that department. I ate a lot of stuff I normally wouldn't eat. Like I ate a whole 16-inch pizza the moment I finished the
Yeah.
race, the FKT.
Yes.
Yeah,
Oh, yeah. I bet that was a really sweet victory meal to have.
it's wonderful.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Would you say, like, what it sounds like you have some actually pretty profound takeaways in terms of it created like a sense of meaning and value that maybe you can't discover until you go to these edges. But would you say that's your biggest takeaway or any other takeaways from the effort?
I think as a result of this, I appreciate simpler things more than I did before. And I can't say I expected that going into this. It was more, uh, I was so far in the pain cave, just cowboy camping without a lot of human interaction and not eating great. Like just all these small things, the creature comforts we have, I appreciate them so much more now. Having a roof over your head, like simple things like that. that I
Yeah,
never really thought about, that I took for granted. I think you even said exactly that, took for granted, that I didn't realize I was taking for granted until I did something like this. And I did not expect the appreciation for everything we have, like I found afterward.
that's really cool. I think that's really cool. For me, I think these moments have punctuated like how little we actually need. I mean, this probably for another podcast, but the idea of, just consumerism being such a part of our culture and
Yep.
uh, really how little we require. And so many of us have everything we need. And I think it really underscores that efforts like this would.
Yeah. I really miss my family a lot, like day 4. I
Yeah.
was like, oh wow, I have another week left. Oh no. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, if we had like, I assume there's just so much we didn't hit on, like your headspace and wanting. I would imagine the temptation to want to quit was present. It sounds like it was on day 2. But you really, Brighton, you did an amazing thing, and this effort is incredible. And I'm excited to see whatever you do next.
Thanks, Nikki. I can't wrap my head around having any more projects right now, but I'll let you know.
That's the spirit. Yeah, that's okay. You've got time. Well, thanks for coming on the podcast and RIP Tyrone. That was my favorite detail. The
You
cat.
got me through. Well,
All right.
thanks, Nikki. It's been fun talking to you.
Yes, thank you. We'll talk to you soon.
All right. Bye.